It's the calm before the storm at Starbase as SpaceX slowly but surely prepares for Starship Flight 13, including a stupendous amount of Deluge testing at Pad 2. Refurbishment is in full swing at Pad 1, we're proofing the launch-mounted LC-39A, Slick 37's tower is stacking, and if that wasn't enough, we've seen some changes to the mystery structure at McGregor. What's going on inside? All of that and much more is coming up in this Starship Update. We're going to start this week at the Gigabay, the huge building where SpaceX plans to assemble and refurbish its version 3 Starships and Super Heavy boosters. We can see that SpaceX has finally reached the stage where the transfer aisle bridge crane will be installed and where the roof trusses will go. But what does a bridge crane actually do, you might ask? As the Gigabay is divided into workstations to produce and stack both boosters and ships, you need to be able to move the vehicles from their workstations or turntables across to the transfer aisle. This is where the bridge crane comes into play. Just like we see inside both of the megabays, it is a large crane mounted on the roof of the building. It can travel across to a turntable, lift a vehicle up to attach another barrel section, or move a fully stacked vehicle over to a workstation or a transport stand for testing or flight. A fully stacked Super Heavy booster with Raptor engines will probably be the heaviest thing that a bridge crane will have to lift inside the Gigabay. When a booster's methane tank is being stacked onto its liquid oxygen tank, we see that the bridge cranes inside Megabay 1 have to hand the methane tank over to each other, as one bridge crane cannot cover both the turntable and the workstation where the liquid oxygen tank is waiting. This is why SpaceX rolls out the liquid oxygen landing tank installation jig to put the methane tank on for a bridge crane swap. We expect that this issue will be resolved inside the Gigabay, which should make the stacking process run a bit more smoothly. SpaceX is prefabricating the roof trusses on the ground before lifting them up with the tower cranes. Prefabricating them on the ground allows for better access during construction and improves the whole process as well. When the roof trusses are installed, SpaceX can then put the roof itself onto the trusses, which will complete the production part of the Gigabay, leaving only the penthouse, the doors, and all the panels to finish the outside of the building. Moving to Sanchez, there's more construction, specifically with the new orbital launch mount for Pad 1. We saw another top deck panel being lifted this week, following the previous lift at the end of May, and while it's a bit hard to see from a distance, it looks as though this top deck piece was lifted and simply moved aside, probably to allow better access for work. Because the launch mount is not yet ready to receive the top deck, we will have to wait a little while before it is actually lifted onto the rest of the mount. The top panel for the launch mount is where the deluge water will exit to protect the mount, including both booster quick disconnects for launches and landings. With the old design at Pad 1, the only protection on the top deck was steel, which would erode over time. The same applied to the booster quick disconnect as well, which increased the refurbishment time needed after each launch. Now that Flight 12 is behind us, we can see that the new design held up far better compared with the old. This standardized design, so to speak, is being duplicated across all of SpaceX's new Starship pads, but more on that later. Stopping by Megabay 2, we can see Ship 41 sitting on the bay's middle work stand, this time with no visible scaffolding surrounding it and only a few thermal tiles missing around the flap aero covers. And while these will protect Starship against the heat of re-entry, you can protect yourself against the sand of the beach with your own TPS beach towel at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. Speaking of future ships, it looks like Ship 40's static fire campaign is not that far off, as a road delay is currently scheduled for the early hours of Tuesday morning. Fingers crossed all 6 Raptors will have lit up by next week's episode. Moving over to the launch site, aerial work platforms have been spotted working on the ship quick disconnect arm on Pad 1's launch tower. This suggests that SpaceX is getting close to finally removing the arm. Even the untrained eye can tell that it has done its time and served the Starship program well. It's ready for its long-awaited retirement, to be replaced with the much improved design we've already seen in action at neighbouring Pad 2. This arm has been basking in the salty Gulf air for all 11 launches at Pad 1 with both Block 1 and Block 2 vehicles. As a result, it also needed to be retrofitted many times to accommodate these changing vehicles, from adding a hot stage ring to changing the fundamental design of the ship. One of those involved the removal of the SQD arm claw that used to stabilize the booster. I'd bet there's some newer fans who may not even know what that is. SpaceX soon realized that the full stack was stable enough on its own and removed the claw from the arm many years ago. The SQD umbilical has also seen a few increases in height due to a taller booster with the addition of a hot staging ring. With all these lessons in mind, SpaceX designed the new arm for Pad 2 to allow for a higher flight cadence. The arm was almost removed the other day. The Buckner-owned Liebherr LR11000 crane received a load spreader, and a crew was even spotted on the arm to help with attaching the load spreader to the umbilical. We expected the spreader to be attached further along the arm, but for whatever reason, SpaceX aborted the removal and then detached the load spreader. While Pad 1 is still undergoing reconfiguration for Block 3, Pad 2 is also receiving some attention, mainly to the chopsticks and the carriage system. SpaceX has added reinforcements to the chopsticks by welding on some doubler plates. Adding these reinforcements to the sticks will help with catching both the booster and the ship by strengthening those sections. In fact, when Pad 1 was being prepared for a booster catch on Flight 5, we saw SpaceX carrying out similar work on the chopsticks there as well. With this work now seemingly complete, the chopsticks were closed once again, and some of the scaffolding around the sticks was even removed. Along with the sticks, a good deal of welding and grinding was also observed around the carriage system, possibly to add further reinforcements. However, the chopstick and carriage work was not the main event at Pad 2 this week. That honour belongs to the Deluge system, which saw a staggering 11 runs. Whilst none of them involved the top deck, on Thursday the 18th, SpaceX performed 3 Deluge tests back to back to back, which is a first, and on the 19th, SpaceX carried out 2 Deluge tests back to back. When everything is connected, SpaceX will be able to use the water mains to refill the Deluge tank farm, replacing the need for the hundreds of water trucks. But that's not all. At the bottom of the trench, there are sump pumps to empty it of the water that would otherwise remain there, either because it's not been evaporated by the Raptor engine's exhaust or simply hasn't been blown out of the trench. To prevent storage from becoming a limiting factor at the tank farm, 2 new tanks have rolled from the port of Brownsville to the launch site. The removal of the older, smaller tanks and the relocation of the ribbed storage tanks has allowed SpaceX to move the 2 new tanks into the freed up space, so we can expect more storage tanks to arrive at the port and be moved into their places once the groundwork is ready. With more tanks at the tank farm, more tanks need filling. Introducing the air separation unit. This week, some more pipes have been installed around the compressor stage and the rest of the ASU. While the air separation unit still has a long way to go, it is slowly but surely connecting more and more of the units together. Eventually, this machine or building or facility will help supplement the commodity supply at Starbase. Over on the other side of the Gulf, SpaceX is carrying out some unique but not entirely new testing at Launch Complex 39A. Just over a month ago, the testing jig Be Proofin was delivered to LC-39A after its journey from Starbase to the Cape. It is now finally installed on the orbital launch mount, but what is Be Proofin actually for? The first time we saw Be Proofin was when it was being used to test Pad 2 at Starbase, where it was hooked up to each clamp in the launch mount to ensure they were all aligned correctly, although this is not the only thing being tested. Be Proofin is also used to verify that the hold-down clamps can withstand the launch thrust from 33 Raptor 3 engines. This is very important, of course. We saw on Flight 12 and during all the pre-flight testing just how powerful those engines are. This testing process should not take too long. At Starbase, Be Proofin spent about 11 days connected to the pad back in November 2025, so we shouldn't expect this time to be much different. Maybe Be Proofin should be renamed to I Keep Proofin for obvious reasons. So where are we now with the progress at 39A, and what's next for the pad? Judging that they're only just now using Be Proofin, we can estimate that they're around 4 to 6 months away from the pad being ready for a vehicle, as that's roughly how long it took for Pad 2 at Starbase. That puts us in a good position for a potential launch from 39A this year in the winter, fingers crossed. But to reach that point, there is still a long list of items that SpaceX will need to complete once Be Proofin has finished proofing. Starting with the 2 booster quick disconnects, they are not yet fully connected or complete, as the teams have not installed the QD hoods, let alone tested them. Next we'll be testing the chopsticks, as they have never moved up or down the tower since they were installed in 2022, along with load testing to ensure they can lift the dry mass of a booster or ship. In between the various tests, SpaceX crews will also be fitting the rest of the shielding on the service structure and installing the hold-down doors for all the clamps to protect them once they retract during launch. But SpaceX isn't just working on a 3rd Starship pad, what about the 4th? The launch infrastructure at Space Launch Complex 37A is growing, quite literally, as the LR13000 crane was hooked up to the 2nd of 9 modules for stacking onto the complex's 1st tower. Eventually, Slick 37 will be home to the 4th and 5th Starship launch pads, although it is unlikely that even the first of these twin pads will be completed before 2028, judging by Starbase's Pad 2, which started construction in mid-2024 and finally supported a launch launch with Flight 12 in May 2026. Now, this Space Coast segment is going to take a turn as we take a very rare trip over to California's Space Coast, Vandenberg Space Force Base. Recently, SpaceX has demolished historic Launch Complex 36 in preparation for converting it into a Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy launch site. However, there is a possibility that instead, SpaceX might change their mind and go through the process of turning the site into a Starship pad, or pads. After all, they've already removed one pad, 39A, from Falcon 9 operations, and it wouldn't be the first time a proposed Falcon launch site ends up supporting Starship. In an alternate timeline, Starbase may be called Falcon Base. Only time will tell what they decide to do, but of course you'd already know all of this if you watched our weekly Friday news show, This Week in Spaceflight. Back on the Best Coast, what is the point of having a pad if you do not have a Gigabay to build the vehicles that will launch from it? The Florida Gigabay is further ahead in construction than the one at Starbase, with a lead of roughly 3 months. Over the past few weeks, SpaceX has been dismantling each of the 4 tower cranes, and finally the last one is coming down with the removal of the top section of the crane along with the lower parts of the others. This means that the main operational crane now building the Gigabay is the Manitowoc MLC 650, a mobile crawler crane sat next to the bay. It is replacing the 4 tower cranes and will be used to complete the rest of the building, because it's difficult to build a roof if you have 4 cranes sticking through it. We are still a long way from producing vehicles in Florida though, as there is not even a suggestion of a star factory yet, and until there is, the Gigabay is going to be more of a glorified storage facility. Until Starship production is ready at the Cape, and as we have discussed in previous weeks, Marmac 31, you'll thank me later, will be used to transport vehicles across to the Space Coast from Starbase until the Cape's facilities are ready. This week, Marmac 31 was moved from the Kennedy Space Center turn basin to Port Canaveral, where it is now docked in the same location it occupied before it first headed to Starbase. A new addition to SpaceX's Roberts Road facility will be a newly proposed car park. This will be needed to support the expected increase in workforce once a Star Factory and Gigabay are up and running at the site, similar to how SpaceX built the multi-story parking garage in Starbase, although this Florida plan is just normal surface parking. Starship in Florida is getting closer to reality, but until then, it's time to head back to Texas for our McGregor Minute. Raptor 3 saw an increase in testing compared with last week, rising from 12 engine tests to 16 as of early Saturday morning. Most of these took place on the Raptor South stand rather than the Raptor vertical stand, unlike last week. The 12 test firings on Raptor South included some relight testing and 4 longer burns of around 141 seconds. Based on the length of the longer burns and the shorter relight burns of 10 to 20 seconds, it's likely these are booster engines being verified for the ascent, boost back, and landing burns. Naturally, the booster requires far more engines than a ship, 33 against only 6, so booster engines would be tested more frequently, especially right now when the production of ships and boosters is running at roughly 1:1. Of course, in the future, more ships will be built than boosters, so the engine testing ratio will change. Of the Raptor sightings this week, our cameras at McGregor spotted Raptor 123, which looks a little dusty and worse for wear, along with Raptors 145 and 149, finishing off with Raptor 80. There were no serial number records this time around sadly, but SN80 seems to be a test Raptor. It was going to fly on Booster 19 as it was seen on the booster prior to its 33 engine static fire test, but for unknown reasons it was replaced and returned to McGregor. Since then, it seems likely SpaceX has been using it to check upgrades on the engine before rolling them out to the rest of the Raptor 3s. This might not be a record, but SN80 did complete one of the fastest test cycles at McGregor with an arrival and departure within 24 hours of each other. There are some other intriguing non-Raptor related updates from McGregor as well. Remember the mystery structure where SpaceX has been testing unknown items? They recently installed a black tarp over the top of the structure. Now, only SpaceX knows why, but we can speculate on the reasons behind it. It is possible that it's to remove the shadows we were able to see moving around inside when they are testing things, although the shadows themselves are not very revealing as to what is going on inside. It is possible that something more obvious may be tested soon and they want to remove any hints. Alternatively, it could simply be an added layer of protection that they are installing, as we have seen parts of the white tarp get damaged by the weather in the past. But here's hoping it's related to the human landing system. Back to where we started, over in Starbase, there's another test site, Massey's. There has been a decent amount of activity. After Booster 20 conducted its cryo testing a couple of weeks ago and then then rolled back to the production site, the booster cryostand was rolled back to Massey's for storage until the next booster in line is ready for testing. Speaking of testing, Ship 39.1, the Block 3 ship aft test article, conducted its 16th cryogenic proof test. It was loaded with liquid nitrogen to verify the structural integrity of the design, although it is likely testing other aspects now rather than just the structure. Ship 39.1 is the only test article that has done anything meaningful recently, as the landing tank was removed from the nose cone gel in a previous episode, and Booster 18.3 has not completed any testing since the beginning of the month. While on the topic of B18.3, this week its actuators were removed. These applied the forces replicating what a vehicle might experience in flight, and perhaps beyond. As a quick reminder, B18.3 is the booster forward and hot stage ring test article, and it has a ship aft mock-up on top for testing the hot stage ring. B18.3 has completed 20 tests over the course of its time, but it is possible that, with the actuator removal, it has wrapped up its testing career. We do not know for sure, however, and there's another factor in play as well. Alongside the actuator removal, the Super Crusher, the cage that B18.3 is in, has had new actuators welded around the bottom of the structure, so potentially SpaceX wants to test different areas of the test tank by applying forces in a different location. It's all part of the march towards Flight 13, which is well and truly on the way, despite the quiet nature of Starbase this week. I've been high-cadence for NSF, thanks for watching, and goodbye.